All right, everyone. Welcome back, CrossFit Control Podcast. So we've had this theme of interviewing members and having guest hosts of other members that do classes with them. But today we're going to do a special episode. So we have Matt Morales, Coach Matt Morales. We have Torrian, who Stallion. I mean, that's really what we should say. But Matt is fresh off of his level 2. And if you guys don't know anything about CrossFit, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 1 is understanding the methodology. So when you go take your level 1, they are teaching you the methodology of CrossFit. The level 2 is understanding how to coach that methodology in a group setting. And I wanted to do this podcast while Matt is fresh. He still has all the pieces, the knowledge that he's picked up over the weekend in his head. And I think the level 2, honestly, when I took it, was one of the biggest eye-opening experiences when it comes to coaching, not just individuals, but in that group setting. So, Matt, I'm just going to let you take it away. Tell us about your weekend.
Yeah. So first off, sorry, woke up a little bit of cough this morning. But level 2 weekend, you go in, and Devin and I had talked about it for a while, and Aaron too, who's off in the corner. But I went into it thinking I was prepared as possible. I thought I was one of the world's greatest coaches. And then you get humbled. You get feedback and a lot of good criticism. Not them just telling you that you're a horrible coach, but they gave me good criticism on how to better manage a class, how to give more effective cues, how to address things that come up in classes for my athletes when I wouldn't know how to react to something like that. So I got some really good feedback. I got to talk to other coaches, see how they would handle different situations. And it's not just necessarily about coaching. It also ties into things like self-efficacy, what gets members into a gym, what keeps members retained in a gym, and what gets that community built inside of a CrossFit gym.
You said you felt like you were pretty prepared, and I am sure you were, but obviously there are holes in all of our games, and there's always things that we can chase and try to perfect. When you say you felt like you were prepared, what were the things you were doing in advance to make sure you were prepared?
To make sure that I was prepared, I would speak to yourself because you are the level 3 here. I'd also speak to my other fellow coaches on feedback on just classes. I talk to members, I talk to other coaches about how I'm doing in classes. Outside of that, reviewing my L1 handbook and notes that I took during my L1 weekend, I still keep that notebook around because it's good to always check back in. There was a special bit of not necessarily what was in the handbook, but just feedback in little tidbits of knowledge that I learned during my L1. Reviewing the L2 handbook, reviewing, points of performance, common faults within every movement, and how to address that and how to spot it, because that's the hardest part with this.
Something you just said is you asked the other members for feedback after your classes, which I was telling Whitney the other day. I praise all you guys. I mean, you guys get texts from me all the time. I really try to tell you guys how much I appreciate what you do for all of our members. But I was telling Whitney, one of the things that really makes Matt stick out in my mind is he's asking for constant feedback. And that is a really hard thing to do, is to humble yourself enough to say, what am I doing wrong? What can I improve on? And actually taking those words and saying, okay, I am going to be a better coach from it. And it's something, man, there's been little pieces that I've said in maybe just one class you've been in, and I've heard you bring it up 2 months later. When you were coaching the athlete the other day, and we were talking about strength gains in the warm-up sets.
Oh, yeah.
And, do you want to dive into that, kind of what we talked about with that?
Yeah, so I popped into a 6 a.m. class, which for those of you who do not come here and might not know this, I originally tried to come to 6 a.m. classes, but getting up that early is a little tough for me. So I came to a 6 a.m. It was a heavy day, and Devin pointed out during the working sets, you want to start heavy and end heavy or heavier because we lose a lot of strength during our building up sets, during our warm-up sets, because we often start way too light And then we try to do very large jumps because we know what starting weight we want to be at. So if my starting weight's going to say 225 for a push jerk, before I would have been like, okay, I'll go 95, 135, 185, 225. Versus I know that I have the capacity for it if I started at, say, 135 or 185. And you have so much more strength to build up during that time.
You're talking about the working sets, right? Because what we see in athletes is like, let's say they're building up to 225 for the last working set. You'll see them come out and they'll do 135 for the first 4 sets, and then on that 5th set, that's an over-exaggeration, but they're not taking the right jumps. And I heard you giving that feedback to someone the other day, and I was like, man, I haven't talked about that in 2 months.
Yeah, that popped up during Barbell Club with the member because he knew what number he wanted to go to at the end for the final set. You know, it was a 5x3 front squat. He knew his number at the final, and I go, hey, so-and-so, I'm not going to say the name, but I go, hey, so-and-so, we're missing out on some strength build here. Why don't we know where we want to be? Let's move those numbers closer to it for our working sets. That way you develop a larger capacity to move that load rather than just 1 set of 3. Say we get 3 sets of 3.
And so a pushback you might get is, well, I'm going to be too tired to do the weight that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's not the weight we're going to hit for today. And that is a hard truth that we have to accept. A good example, yesterday we did Isabel, and it said you should be able to do the 5 reps unbroken. And in the build-up sets, I can do singles of 135 all day if I want. But in my head, I was like, if I truly want to do this weight, I have to do it unbroken. Was it tough? It absolutely was. But I've seen athletes before where it says, hey, in your warm-up rounds or in your mock rounds, you need to be able to do this. Diane's a great example. I can't remember what the deadlift was, but it was like 10 reps unbroken or something. Mm-hmm. And I had someone say, well, in the warm-up, I'm going to be too tired for the workout. Then it's not the right weight for the workout. And if we do the right weight, we'll actually get better and perform better over time. Now, maybe not today because we're not doing the 225 that we want to do, but a month or 2 months from now, we do see that improvement. I mean, we talked about that with your box jump. And it's a really hard thing for us to sit back and accept that, but I think you do a great job of approaching the athletes and making them feel comfortable enough to do it. The other example is you had another athlete who really wanted to do handstand push-ups. And I can't remember if I was taking the class or if I was sitting off to the side, and I really tried to not step in when you guys are coaching, but obviously there's safety concerns. And we have progressions on when we should be doing this stuff. But I remember you let the athlete, they were doing handstands, and they could do handstands. But the second they tried to do the negative, it wasn't happening, and they were asking if they could stack 2 or 3 ab mats. And I thought the way you approached it, you waited until you said, all right, guys, let's go grab a drink, and then you quietly pulled them aside and you said, hey, I want you to do this, and this is why I want you to do it. Not just saying, hey, I want you to scale, because when we hear that word scale, it puts a negative thought in our head.
Connotation to
it,
yeah.
The way you approached it was, hey, buddy, rather than reducing that range of motion to do the handstand push-up, you were like, I want you to build strength so then you can do those push-ups later. It was, and the way you did it of waiting till everyone was separated versus calling him out in front of everyone was absolutely perfect. So I give you a ton of praise all the time because you'll take little pieces that I give and just you'll use it forever.
Yeah. And it kind of comes back to what I learned this weekend, right? When it came to, especially with if you have to scale back with like the handstand push-up, or if you need to scale back and wait for a workout, we have these benchmarks for a reason. The reason why CrossFit works so well is you might increase your time on a workout. Say with Isabel yesterday, I had a lot of athletes who said, oh, I beat my last time by 30 seconds, 40 seconds. You might not get a faster time, but hey, you might use a heavier weight this time. So that's where CrossFit gives us these results. You're either going faster, you're able to move longer, or maybe you're moving with a heavier weight, and that's how we continuously push and push and push and strive for our athletes to do just one little tad bit better.
So another piece I heard you, well, I mean, I didn't hear it, we were discussing this, is the amount of trainers up there who were they were getting ready to have their level 1 expire. So they were taking their level 2.
Yep.
And how many people taught these progressions incorrectly? Not just like out of order or trying to make up their own, but they were actually saying, do this, and this is not the correct way to do it.
It was a little eye-opening, and for those of you who don't know, I've talked to Devan and Torrian and Aaron about this in the past. This is my third CrossFit gym now. I started CrossFit back in 2016 in Central Florida, and I've since done a different CrossFit gym in the area ever since I moved up to West Virginia. But to see the amount of trainers who either don't know their points of performances just with their movements, that puts your athletes at risk of injury. If you don't know exactly what to look for with a movement, how can you know how you're going to better help an athlete or get them to move as safely as possible?
Yeah, you were talking about, someone was telling you, like, squat with your feet underneath your hips.
Yeah, squat with my feet directly underneath my hips. And I was like, I do not have the range of motion for that. And most athletes do not.
Well, that's when you ask them, like, how are my hips supposed to pass through this area if my femurs are in the way? Like, you can break it down and be more technical with it of, like, this is why your feet have to be shoulder width apart. But that's why the way we coach, we make it as easy as possible for the athlete. But you were talking about, like, you've coached at other places. Is this the first place that really focused heavily on making sure we can move correctly at a certain weight before we increase the intensity or before we improve on our progressions?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And that's something that we, the coaches here, have discussed during our meetings and outside of our meetings, and we make sure that our members know about it too. Like Torrian, for example, is in my barbell club, and Torrian's number one goal, because he played football, he was used to lifting weights, but he wanted to work on technique before he built up and load. And I think that's how it should be, and we do a great job of it here with the gym, is we make sure that athletes know not just what is the proper mechanics for movement, but how to get into it and why they're doing it. We explain why they need to move well, whether it be risk of injury or to increase power.
Was it difficult coming into this gym after coaching at other places and coaching in that way?
It was a little bit of a learning curve. I gotta admit that one, yeah. But between yourself, Matt, Aaron, I hadn't met you yet, but between yourself, Matt, and Heather, the three of you just kind of drilled it into my head pretty well as far as this is what we're focusing on. And I started to understand okay, if we focus on this, the increase in power, the increase in strength, the decreased time on workouts, it's going to accompany it very shortly.
I make the joke sometimes that we are hurting CrossFit's statistics on injuries because we have probably the lowest number of injuries out of any CrossFit gym. Out of the 3 years that we've been open, Greg popping his Achilles is one of maybe 2 injuries I've seen, and that was it was going to happen no matter what because of the bone spurs that he had built up in his ankle. So that's not even a CrossFit thing. He was jumping rope and it was a freak accident. It wasn't a movement pattern error. But the reason our athletes are so safe all the time and we have such a low number of injuries is because we watch their movement patterns. We say, hey, let's go back to this real quick and let's build up the capacity before attempting this, because that's the truth. Like, your rotator cuff needs a certain amount of strength to be able to do ring muscle ups. That is the, you know what I mean? It's the truth. Same thing with the handstand push-ups. Your shoulders need a certain capacity to be able to do that. Even your neck needs a certain capacity to be able, even if you are doing it safely, your neck needs a certain capacity to do these things. And I think we do a really good job of keeping everyone safe enough and making them enjoy it enough that they want to keep coming back. Torrian is being really quiet because he doesn't want to say
Come on, Torrian, join in.
You want to ask him any questions on his level 2?
I wanted to bring up the point that you brought up earlier, the example with the member, pulling him aside, and telling him, Like, hey, let's work up to that progression. Let's build on this first. I think that's very important from a mentality standpoint. First off, not calling him out in front of everybody, as you mentioned, but pulling him aside, having a one-on-one conversation, because that's where that personal trainer aspect of the gym really comes in. That one-on-one coaching, which a lot of us need at times more than others. But I think for me, and I don't know about the member, but it's almost an encouragement mentally, knowing that, oh, okay, I can get to that point one day, but right now, let's do all that I can with this progression. I think that's very important. I really wanted to hit on that because that not only reflects on you as a coach, and as you, Devin, too, but also how much that's a nugget implanted in that member moving forward as they continue to progress in their workouts, their weights, all these things. And so, like I said, everything when we do things around here, the mentality.
Yeah. So, Torrian, a fun little story, and Devin, I don't know if I told you this one from the L2 yet. This is something that we talk about during the small little breakout groups that we do when we're coaching movements is how do we address concerns where it's with like one member, say they are a little more shy, they don't want to be called out in the middle of class, and as coaches, we know this. No, and as people, we know like, yeah, I don't want to get called out in the middle of class, and by all means, I completely understand that. But it's about caring and knowing about your members. That is first and foremost. If you don't invest in your members' lives, how are you going to be able to help them improve?
Yeah.
So just knowing that, and then, there's times during classes where I know if it's something that the larger part of the group, if it's a common fault for everyone, then I'll stop everyone. I'll go, hey guys, just remember, keep the weight in the heels as we're going down into the squat. But if it's just for like one individual, where in this case they weren't able to have that capacity for the handstand push-up, it's just a quick little address for that. And you do that off to the side. It doesn't need to involve everyone else in the class.
Yeah. One more thing I want to bring up too is the technique, the moving patterns, as you mentioned. I know for me, I didn't really get a whole lot of that in college. I got it to an extent.
Yeah.
But to the detail, I remember even coming here for the first time with Devin, like, you would notice the littlest things. And somebody told me that too. I think it was Matt Walker, and how he mentioned, like, I want to get to the point. I'm going to get to the point. Like Devin, how he notices the littlest things. And I see you getting there too. I've noticed it over the time I've known you. And that's so important because, I think back to college sports, how, I'll take one step to the left, or I'll take one step right, or maybe I took a drop step. I get called out on doing film. Those little things makes the difference in getting 3, 4, 5 yards a carry. And it's the same thing here, just with lifting weight, or it could just be an increase in 5 pounds. So I think that's important. I've seen, and I really appreciate it too, from the both of you all, and even you, Aaron, a couple of weeks ago. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Just the littlest things makes the difference.
Do you know why I'm able to see those little things? Because I focus on the macro movement too. So that's the whole theme of this is these trainers who are they're teaching and not really focusing on movement patterns. So how are they ever going to be able to see the micro pieces if they don't even understand the macro pieces? Yeah. There was something else I was going to say on that. I cannot remember.
Can I piggyback off of that one really quickly?
Yeah.
So, Torrian, there's something that all good trainers should do. First thing is understanding movement patterns and what does that. Second is you can take a movement, look at it, notice these subtle faults, whether it be in the static phase or the dynamic phase, like whether you are moving or whether you are stopped. But being able to take that micro fault, so we take a microscope, we zoom in on it, but also being able to step back, look at the bigger picture after we notice that fault. How is it transitioning? If you don't open up your hips all the way on the clean, how is that going to affect the entire movement?
Another thing that Matt mentioned was looking at the group pattern. And this is something that is a hard thing to do. I'll be honest, because we get these coaches' notes, and I never even look at them, to be honest. I write my timeline off of their timeline, but as far as my teaching for the day, it's off of the group. And I've done this long enough. I know everyone in the gym that I can say, okay, this is what the macro teaching is going to be, and then I can do my micro as I go around. But that's kind of what Matt was hinting at, is we don't need to do the 6 points performance for a deadlift every single time we deadlift. I mean, it's going to get boring at some point. It's just picking up stuff and putting it down. What I really like to focus on is one or two things. It gives me more focus time, makes them better at those two things. And then it also, what you said, it allows me to look at the group as an entirety and see what is the next fault that they're struggling with that I can focus on. And we've had, Heather was an amazing coach, but that was something she struggled with, was she wanted to teach exactly how the notes said. And I think she's probably worked on it to this point when she was getting ready for a level 2. But something I always like to do, again, just look at the entirety of the group, pay more attention to the things that they need to work on. And I think that you guys both do a good job of that as well.
I'm sorry, my bad. That's just something that I feel like it comes with time, is being able to notice what are a common theme that everyone is starting to struggle with, especially with a movement like the air squat, the deadlift, or even like the shoulder press. You can only drill in that movement so many times without making members be like, oh, well, we're going to do the same thing for a deadlift. But if we focus on one thing, and we all do a pretty good job with it, we tell members, hey, I understand that we can always make the movement better, but I want you to focus on this one thing today. If you make one part of that movement better, over time, the entire movement will become closer towards the standard of what we want. That felt good.
Do you have anything? Usually I ask people, like, what's something you would want to share with someone who's wanting to get started with CrossFit, but what's something you would want to share with a coach who is considering getting their level 2, but they're on the fence?
If you are considering getting your level 2 and you're not on the fence, first off, just go right for it. The tips, the knowledge that you'll gain, and the feedback is, I can't even describe it. It is just amazing. There's nothing else like it. But just look at yourself, take a step back when you're coaching, and look at how you're addressing things. Are you addressing these small faults? If, say, Torrian, I'm just going to use you as an example. If I notice that Torrian has a fault in his movement, am I just giving him one cue and then stepping away? So if you're considering going into your level 2, take a step back, ask your fellow coaches about how your coaching is going. Ask your members, hey, am I helping you during classes? Are you feeling better with the movement? The greatest piece of feedback that I got this weekend was to be more relentless with giving cues. So not just giving one cue and then seeing a small improvement, but knowing that we can always do better. It's not necessarily just drill right into one member for the entire 60 minutes, but offering cues to everyone and constantly going back around and rechecking, reassessing, seeing if the fault is being fixed.
I like it. You guys got anything else?
No, just check out the other episodes of the podcast.
And come in and train with us.
Yeah,
we're the best gym around. Like, it's the truth. So thanks, everyone, for listening. Hopefully we see you next week.
Thanks, guys.